Another month goes by and Intel's graphics drivers seemingly provide another 5 billion% or so increase to performance, and I have actually got a leaked video of Nvidia and AMD taking a quick look at these results.
It's over 9,000! What, 9,000?
But in all seriousness, it is pretty cool that these new driver updates are continuing to provide such big performance increases. And so today we're going to be having a look at the new 4514 beta drivers, and you can opt into the beta drivers if you just go on the ARC control panel and opt in. But yeah, these aren't the latest stable drivers, and we'll get on to maybe some bugs and that at the end of the video. But yeah, so just keep in mind that these aren't the most stable drivers as of yet because they're in beta, but they do provide some interesting release notes for them. Quite notably, that Assassin's Creed Unity, a DX11 title, they're seeing up to 284% uplift at 1080p with very high settings, and then 316% uplift at 1440p with high settings, which is crazy. I mean, it probably should have been at the performance that it is now back when it released, but to see that they are continuing to improve even on these older titles is really cool. And going on to a more modern title, which I am going to actually test today, F122, the DX12 title, and they're seeing up to 36% uplift at 1080p with high settings, 20% uplift at 1440p with high settings, and then a 10% uplift at 1080p on ultra high settings and all ray tracing enabled, which yeah is pretty cool. Another game they've got on here is Deathloop, and that is another DX12 title, and they're seeing up to 10% uplift at 1080p at ultra settings and 8% uplift at 1440p with very high settings. So yeah, the games we're going to be having a look today, it's going to be F1 2022. We're going to be having a look at Cyberpunk, and we're going to be having a look at Total War Warhammer 3. These aren't the only games we're going to be having a look at, but these are the games that I'm going to be comparing against the older driver that I use, which was the 4091 driver, and also those are going to be compared to the RTX 3060 Ti. A few months ago I did a video on that, comparing those two graphics cards, and those were the games I used, so we're going to use them again today. We're going to see the differences and see if we have got close to an RTX 3060 Ti, because spoiler, in the previous video the RTX 3060 Ti was pretty much crushing the Intel ARC A770. So hopefully with these new drivers, and it has been a few months, so there has been a few months worth of drivers to actually help increase performance even further. We'll see if we can get close to the RTX 3060 Ti. And then after we've seen those results, I'll get into a few other games just to see what performance is like in general in 2023. But before we get into the benchmarks, I'm just going to go over the system that we are going to use. It is going to be the same as the last time I tested the drivers, and so it will consist of an Intel i3 12100F, an MSI Pro H610MB motherboard, 16 gigabytes of 3200 MHz DDR4 RAM, and the Intel ARC A770 limited edition. So after those benchmarks, we can see that it's a pretty decent increase from the 4091 drivers that I used a few months ago to today, the beta drivers, which are the 4514. Yeah, pretty good increase there. And to go over those increases, we were actually really close to the RTX 3060 Ti, to a point where I would actually kind of want to test more games against it, because I think those results were pretty close. We were within maybe 10% at all times to the RTX 3060 Ti, and sometimes even closer. As you saw as well, a lot of the 1% lows and 0.1% lows were very good as well compared to the RTX 3060 Ti. But compared to the last drivers, the 4091 drivers, these new drivers, the 4514, and yeah, if we are playing shots, then take a shot every time I mention the drivers. We have F122, which saw a 33% increase at 1080p for me, and then a 25% increase at 1440p, and then no change at 4K, but that can just be put down to a margin of error because they are actually slightly worse. Then moving on to Cyberpunk 2077, we saw the biggest increase of the day, which was 36% at 1080p, and then 22% at 1440p. Then at 4K, you might have noticed the no data for the RTX 3060 Ti and Intel ARC A770, and the reason for that is that I didn't actually test these to begin with at 4K, and that's because when I was testing the Intel ARC A770 separately, I noticed that it couldn't actually reach 4K 30 without any upscaling. So I didn't think it was fair in those results in that testing to enable DLSS for the RTX 3060 Ti and then FSR 2.1 for the Intel ARC A770. So then in our final game for these comparisons at least, we had Total War Warhammer 3, and this was the smallest increase that we saw. We saw 9% at 1080p, and then 10% at 1440p, and then basically exactly the same at 4K. So it was interesting to me that they haven't mentioned Cyberpunk in the increases for the driver. Maybe Cyberpunk increased in performance in previous drivers that I haven't looked at yet. But yeah, it's just interesting that they just mentioned F122 and then Deathloop and then Assassin's Creed Unity. So it's not just those games that have seen an improvement, but we can see that there's quite a broad spectrum of games that would have actually seen an improvement from these new drivers. So now we'll move on with the benchmarks for the other 4 games that I used to test the Intel ARC A770, just to see what it can do in 2023. So going over the results from those benchmarks, we first had Red Dead Redemption 2, which some of you have said that I should test in previous videos with. And yeah, we saw some pretty solid results. 85 average at 1080p, 73 at 1440p, and 52 at 4K. Overall, a very playable experience at the balance preset, which does set most things to high and ultra. And then moving on, I also wanted to test F1 23 just to see how the difference in year had an impact on the frame rate, just because they did mention F1 22 in their driver update, even though the new game is out. So I was just wondering if that transferred over, and it does seem to have transferred over. We got a little bit higher in our 4K result, which is nice to see, and then maybe slightly lower in the 1080p and 1440p results. I then moved on to Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and it did better than I thought it would do, to be fair. I mean, when I played through this game, it was on a 4090, and to be fair, the smoothness was basically the same, because as you probably know, Jedi Survivor isn't the most optimized of games. It doesn't run perfectly, and so for this benchmark, all I did was I ran round a encampment in the game, and I just killed the same enemies over and over again to get these results at 1080p, 1440p and 4K. Interestingly, I actually felt that 1440p played the best. I think that also showed by the 1% lows being significantly higher than 1080p and 4K, which is a bit weird, but it's just how it came out. So yeah, it did feel a little bit smoother playing at 1440p. And then moving on to our last game, we had Hogwarts Legacy. And so to test this, I basically just started in Hogwarts, ran out into the courtyard, made my way to Hogsmeade, which is terribly optimized, so I did not take it easy on this game when I did this benchmark for it. So this is pretty much the worst you could probably see in Hogwarts Legacy. So yeah, considering this could be the worst that you could see, I didn't think it did too bad. In 4K, I did end up using the Intel XESS, upscaling at ultra quality though, which made the game look nicer than 1440p. But also played basically exactly the same. So I think it was a win-win in that regard. And finally, I'm just going to go over a few little bugs and niggles that I had with these drivers. So styling up Cyberpunk, there was a weird thing where the screen just went completely black for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and I thought the game had frozen, but I decided to give it a chance, and then I got the CDPR logo come up, and then everything worked smoothly. So that was a little bit weird. And then in F1 2022, the game crashed on me 2 or 3 times and just chucked me out the game for no reason. And the times that it did that, I was just actually in the menus. So yeah, I'm not sure why that, but again, it's just ARC things, I suppose, at the end of the day. And that would bring an end to this video, I guess. So yeah, see you later.